So it's day 166, and I'm going to do something a little different. So I'm going over the news of the day, but I'm only going over selected news from RT and Pravda. So you get a flavor for the news in Ukraine from the perspective of the Russian state media. Now, what's interesting about this is that it's not that they're wrong or lying or anything else. It's more like they're giving 80% of the facts and then they're just giving a little spin on it that's going to make things different. Sometimes it's a little out there, like USA will dump Ukraine for Taiwan, says a political analyst. That's a little different. That's out there. Here, political analyst Dmitry Zuhurlev believes that Washington. Now, first, you can find a political analyst to say anything. But he believes that Washington will stop providing military support to Ukraine if it deems it necessary to strengthen its U.S. military presence in Taiwan. That may be true, let's say. Okay, Taiwan will be a bigger issue for Americans than Ukraine. The Americans will abandon Ukraine only if they don't have the strength to pull both. Again, it may be true, but this is all speculation. This isn't what happened. And then here, U.S. media have been switching public attention from Ukraine to Taiwan lately. Well, that's just a media cycle. I mean, that's how the media cycle works. I mean, we switched our attention from Ukraine to who was it? Johnny Depp's trial. I mean, so that that kind of thing happens all the time. But I want you to notice some things. Pravda is terrible. I mean, it's just look at this tiny little article with a provocative headline, an expert who may or may not be an expert, and this is the length of it. It's not really anything useful. Pravda is really kind of bad as far as their propaganda, but it'll get picked up and then repopulated in other magazines. Okay, here's another one. This is also from Pravda, Ukrainian army about to break down completely. It's not that it broke down, and if you could show that, that would be something newsworthy, but somebody somewhere predicting that it will. The collapsing defense capability of the armed forces of Ukraine and Russia's advance in the Adifa direction will morally affect Ukrainian militants. First Deputy Minister of the Information for the DPR, Daniel Breznov, said. Okay, so you know what side he's on and how he's going to see things and what he's going to say. He shared an interesting observation that he heard from a soldier of the DPR army who is known for his pessimistic and realistic views. Okay, any soldier can say anything. He said that Ukrainians were about to break down completely and crumble. We are going to push them out from several settlements, and they will no longer cling to Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. That is, they have already been morally broken, said this guy. Okay, so what? I mean, some soldier somewhere said that thing. That doesn't mean it's going to happen. One, that doesn't mean it's true. Two, it's already slanted. It's not like this happened in the reporting facts, the reporting speculations. And you see a lot of that when you look at Russian news like Pravda and RT. Now, here I want to compare notes. So here is Radio Free Europe, and then I'm going to show you Pravda, and then I'm going to show you RT. Russia imposed leader of Ukraine's Zaporizhia region orders referendum on joining Russia. Okay, so this actually is happening. This guy actually did order this referendum, and so we're going to see something about it. Yevgeny Belinsky, the Moscow-appointed head of Ukraine's southern-eastern Zaporizhia region, has officially ordered a local referendum on the possibility of the province joining the Russia Federation. He signed the order at an event held by the We Are Together with Russia movement. It was a rally, a We Are Together with Russia movement. So who's going to join that? It's all going to be people who are pro-Russian, right? Okay, in the city of Melitopol on August 8th. Zelensky said that if referendums on joining Russia proceed in Russian-occupied territories, there can be no peace talks. What's the purpose of peace talks if you're just going to wantonly violate law anyway? What you put on paper isn't worth the paper it's printed on. So it's going to be settled by force of arms. If the occupiers proceed along the path of pseudo-referendums, they will close themselves any chance of talks with Ukraine and our free world, which the Russian side will clearly need at some point. He said this in his daily address a day or two ago. On August 8th, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said that he was suggesting that the referendums were the will of the residents of the Russian-occupied territories. Okay, I mean, I get that you want to have the will of the referendum, of the people in the territories, but what he's saying isn't really, I mean, you can't really tell the actual will of the people that have a gun to their head. So, okay. So that's essentially the article. And that's a reasonably fair something from Radio for Europe. Here's how Pravda carried the same information. Ukraine's Zaporizhia and Kherson regions to hold joint Russia votes first. So the same guy that I had a hard time pronouncing, the head of the Zaporizhia region of Ukraine, signed an order from the Central Election Committee to start working on a referendum for the region. So far, same facts. Here he's being quoted. Today, within the framework of the Forum of the Public Movement, We Are Together with Russia of the Zaporizhia region, a draft resolution was read with a proposal to hold the referendum of the entry of Zaporizhia region into the Russian Federation, and more than 700 delegates supported the resolution. You mean delegates to the We Are Together with Russia organization are all on board? Wow. So it sounds like it's more impressive than it is. 700 delegates. Well, these are all people on your side anyway. Like this is no surprise. Similar referendums at which local residents will go to the polls to decide whether the region should become part of Russia or not may be held in other territories of Ukraine. So like they're already projecting that this is going to happen. Olga Kolvidi, a member of the Federation Council from Crime, like this is a fascinating typo. From Crimea is what it's supposed to be, Crimea. But a member of the Federation Council from Crime wrote on Telegram, I think that the issue should not be limited to Zaporizhia and Kherson regions. We will undoubtedly help our brothers and sisters in Ukraine who were deceived and actually abandoned by the Ukrainian authorities that got so much entangled in lies, Kolvidi stressed. Okay, so it was pretty cool as far as carrying the facts initially, right? And then we got the quote, and the quote it gave us a little bit more with the delegates, and then the similar referendums is kind of like this is where Russia's going. But when you end it like this, and they often end it with this spin, they put this like spin on the ball that's going to really take it a different direction from a somewhat neutral fact-based piece like you saw with Radio Free Europe to a very slanted piece like you see here. I absolutely love the from the council from Crime rather than Crimea. I think that was a brilliant typo. Okay, Ukrainian region announces. Here's another article. Ukrainian region announces a vote on joining Russia. So the Zaporite region will hold a referendum on whether to secede from Ukraine and request joining Russia on the head of its administration announced on Monday. Okay, over 700 representatives from the various parts of Ukrainian region approved the idea. Okay, from the various parts, but they were all at this conference. Like they're all in your pocket. It's not like these are delegates throughout the whole region who are just, delegates. Earlier comments by the administration officials indicated that the referendum may be held as soon as mid-September. So that's adding another piece of fact to our analysis, to our understanding. Officials in Kherson, another Russia-controlled part of Ukraine, voiced similar plans to put a vote on the proposal of breaking away from Kyiv and seeking to join Russia. Zelensky on Sunday reiterated his warning that if the regions go through with their plans, Kyiv will break off talks with Russia. And here we have. Now, this is Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov commenting on Monday. The thing is, this is what the residents of the region plan. No, this is what the government of the occupied region plans, not what the residents of the region plan. So that's a very different thing. And then here at the end, Moscow said it prepared a draft peace agreement based on those proposals, but Ukraine never responded. There's a reason when they didn't respond and why they didn't respond, and you're not telling the rest of the story. So they tell like a big chunk of the truth and then they spin it, or they don't tell the whole story or whatever. So that's how that works. So let me give you some more examples. So here we see West wants to destroy Russia, says a former president, and this is Dmitry Medvedev. Okay, he says the West launched an aggressive geopolitical process aimed at destroying Russia. The links, these are the links of the same chain, the part of the same scheme orchestrated by the West, like what happened in Georgia in 2008. He's blaming the West. What happened in Ukraine is he's blaming the West. This is a single process and a common plan directed against Russia. It consists of the desire of the West, primarily of the United States and other Anglo-Saxon countries, to rock the situation in our country. How? Through neighbors in close proximity to the border of Russia. Okay, you realize you're the one invading, Both in Georgia and here, and if they're cozying up to the West, to like NATO and to the European Union, let's just use Ukraine. If they're cozying up, it's because you've been abusive to them. That's what's going on here. And if they run into the arms of Europe to get protection from you, there's a reason that they need protection from you. Okay. Before the conflict with Georgia began in 2008, when Georgia's forces began shelling the disputed region of South Ossetia, and killed a number of Russian peacekeepers and civilians, the U.S. was cynically engaged in the training, funding, and arming of the Georgian army. Okay, it's in dispute what actually happened, but they're putting out their perspective of what happened and why, and only their perspective. The same provocative and, let's face it, criminal policy of the U.S. is currently being aggressively pursued in Ukraine, Medvedev said, adding this time the process is receiving more active support from the EU, which he says has finally lost its independence. But the end goal remains the same, he claimed, to destroy Russia. Okay, the US wasn't doing anything to destroy Russia before you invaded Ukraine. When you invaded Ukraine, knocking over your neighbor, trying to overthrow the world order because you can do this to a neighbor and then other dictators are going to get that message, that's when the US was getting involved in this. Not before, like you're claiming. Medvedev noted that neither Kyiv nor Tbilisi will ever become members of NATO or the EU, and that even the unshaven guy in the green t-shirt from Kyiv understands that. Okay, if they're never going to become members of NATO and the EU, why are you invading? What are you worried about? But okay, and then even the green guy in the green t-shirt from Kyiv is obviously Zelensky. And now see, the misery here is this is what Russians are reading, or people that are sympathetic to Russia, and then they'll get picked up by other media. So that's why this kind of thing's dangerous. Here's another one. Russia warns of Polish plans for Ukraine. This was absolutely fascinating. Russia warns of Polish plans for Ukraine. Polish plans? Well, if you roll back the clock 300 years ago or so, they were fighting with the Poles, but they're not doing that now. But here's what they're saying. Warsaw continues to carry out an apparent attempt to reclaim parts of Ukraine in accordance with its far-reaching plans for the country, says the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service. Okay, I mean, they're making stuff up, and they're saying it, but that what? This can be illustrated, for example, by the purchase of new barley crop for $30 per ton, which is almost 5 times cheaper than the real cost of the product. All this is being done under the new legal framework created by Kyiv, referring to a law and special guarantees for Polish citizens introduced in late July, also one that allows Ukrainian industrial enterprises to be sold at a 50% discount. That's because they want to sell it for something to actually make some money. That's what's going on here. But here, let's look at the end. Intelligence obtained by Moscow suggested that Poland and the U.S. were working on a plan for Warsaw to regain control of Ukrainian areas that they consider historically belonging to it. Now, that's what Russia's doing. That's not what that's not what Poland is doing. Much of what you see in the Russian media is they're projecting, like Freudian projection, they're projecting on Ukraine what they are actually doing, and they're doing that to Poland right here. He also suggested that the first phase of this reunification project would see Polish troops deployed to parts of Ukraine as peacekeepers under the pretext of protecting Ukraine from Russian aggression. Now, Medvedev is kind of nuts. He posted this on his channel on July 27th. This is pre 2014 Ukraine, including Crimea. And then he has this map of this is what's left of Ukraine after Russia gobbles up most of it. Poland grabs 7 of the oblasts. Romania and Hungary grab portions of it for some unexplicable reasons that I just don't understand. Like, I don't understand why Romania's getting it. But then, and his caption is, in the brain of the president of Ukraine, affected by psychotropic substances, the following picture of the bright future of his country arose. See figure 1. Wait, you're saying that in his addled brain, he sees this, but in your addled brain, you're seeing this and not thinking anything like that something's wrong here? Okay, but that is what's being put out to the Russian public on the former president of Russia's Telegram channel. Okay, so let me give you another example. Here is the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. I was just talking to a friend who works in nuclear power, asking him like, how bad is this, and like how much is this going to blow back on Russia if it actually goes sideways? and it's bad. Like if they blow up this plant, Russia's going to feel the effect as badly as anybody outside of Ukraine. Okay, the Russians have begun. This is Interfax Ukraine, so this is going to have a Ukrainian view of it. Here's what's going on. The Russians have begun to openly blackmail the whole world, declaring that they have mined Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. In his statement, and this is says Energoatom, that is the official power plant company. In his statement, the head of the radiation, chemical, and biological defense troops of the Russian armed forces, Major General Valery Velisevez, who now commands Zaporizhia nuclear power plant garrison, said that there will either be Russian land or a scorched desert. Now that's a crazy warning, right? But you gotta like take the guy at face value. According to Energy Atom, however they pronounce that. As you know, we have all. They said this from Vasteles. As you know, we have mined all the important facilities of the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, and we do not hide this from the enemy. We warn them. The enemy knows that the plant will either be Russian or no one's. We are ready for the consequences of this step, and you warriors, liberators, must understood that if we have no other way, and if there is the toughest order, we must fulfill it with honor. So they're saber rattling. Now, remember, there's been this like he said about Russia and Ukraine saying, no, they fired artillery on us. They fired artillery on us. I can't imagine that the Ukrainians want to fire artillery on their own power plant. I mean, who else is going to fire the artillery? But they're not going to do that. That's suicidal. But Russia has done false flag kind of operations before, and we've seen it, and I mean, a week away from the POW thing. Okay, here's The Guardian covering the same thing. Okay, The Guardian is a British newspaper. Attack on Ukraine nuclear power plant, suicidal, says the UN chief as he has urges access to the site. So, any attack on a nuclear power plant is a suicidal thing, says the head of the UN. We fully support the IAEA in their efforts in relation to create the conditions of stabilization of the plant. Ukraine's ambassador to the IAEA says Zaporizhia staff were working under conditions of the barrel of Russian guns. And a little bit more, Russian installed authorities in the area said Ukrainian forces hit the site with a multiple rocket launcher. Ukrainian nationalists launched this artillery strike on the territory of the specified object on 5 August. 2 high voltage power lines and a water pipeline were damaged as a result of the shelling. Now, Ukraine says Russia has turned the plant into a military base, which they can't do. It's against the laws of warfare. And Amnesty International was chastising the Ukrainians last week for hiding in schools that were unoccupied, but they're hiding in a nuclear power plant. Okay, Russia has been using the plant as cover from which to fire on Ukrainian forces since mid-July. It has not been possible. Now, here's what I like about The Guardian. The Guardian's piece says it's not been possible to independently determine which side was responsible for the attack on the power station. And so that's usually the mark of good journalism when they say, look, we haven't been able to independently verify, or we have verified, or whatever. Now, let's go to RT and look at the same story, and you can kind of guess what's coming. Here is Russia accuses Ukraine of nuclear terrorism. Okay, that's the title of the story. Ukrainian troops have committed a new act of nuclear terrorism by continuing to shell the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the Russian Defense Ministry warned on Monday. The nuclear plant, Europe's largest in southern Ukraine, was seized by Russian forces in late February. The facility continues to operate under Russian control. Ukraine's 44th Artillery Brigade fired at the plant on Sunday from the village of Marganets. Okay. The shelling damaged a high voltage power line, causing short circuit at the plant, Koneshishov says, and he added that a fire broke out at the facility, was then put out. According to the Russian Defense Ministry, it was the second time a Ukrainian shelling had caused a fire and partial outage. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky accused Russia of shelling the Zaporizhzhia plant on Friday. Russian nuclear terror requires a stronger response, he said. And then Ukraine and the U.S. previously accused Russian soldiers of using the plant as cover, like as if they weren't actually using the plant as cover. They're occupying it and they're shelling from it, but they've been accused of using the plant as cover in the fight against the Ukrainian troops. And Russia has rejected these claims, even though they're doing it. They're actively doing it, and they're rejecting these claims. So they're lying, and then they're lying about lying, or at least misdirecting about it. Like they've been accused of this, but we've rejected those claims. but this is what Russians are reading and Russian sympathizers are reading. I'm amazed how many people don't know what they're talking about, and then they comment on my videos from the Russian perspective with like this kind of thing in mind. So please watch, read, study, understand it. Okay, this is going to be, now the misery here is that it's not just the Russians, but it's then going to be picked up in other places. So I highlighted all this text. And so you see this, Ukrainian troops have committed a new act of nuclear terrorism. And then let's look at Google. Ukrainian troops have committed a new act of terrorism. Okay, that's RT. Ukrainian was responsible for a new act of terrorism, Russia's defense minister said in a statement, and it's going to be carried. Ukrainian troops have committed a new act of terrorism by continuing to shell the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plants. Ukrainian troops have committed a new act of terrorism by continuing to shell the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plants. So it's going to be carried on and on and on and on in Google. And that's, they understand the propaganda. I got to give the Russians something. They understand propaganda and they understand the value of propaganda. And that is what I wanted you to understand today on day 166 when you view the news through the Russian lens. Thanks for your time. If you're still here, please subscribe. Share these with people who want to understand what's actually happening in Ukraine.